Brian Williams, the long-standing anchor of NBC's Nightly News, came to Fairfield University's Regina A. Quick Center to speak to the students, faculty, and members of the Fairfield community. News 64 was able to get an interview with the award-winning journalist before he began his sold-out speech. First off, let me just start by asking you what you plan to address the students, faculty, and Fairfield community about today.
I think I'll talk about our times. I think I'll talk about the challenge of the coming year. I think I'll talk about what I do for a living, who I am, my background, how it differs from a lot of the people who will be in the audience today. I failed to graduate from college. I happen to work in an industry where that credential isn't necessary all the time for advancement. I mean, you look at Cronkite and Jennings, two of the great names in my line of work, also failed to graduate from college. So in my line of work, reading is everything. Knowledge is everything. I think there's a huge confusion right now. A lot of people are confusing information with knowledge. We're no smarter a society because we have the internet. We have a ton of information. I don't think we're any more learned. So I think these are some of the points that'll come out today. And I have these two very sharp interrogators who are going to try to pin me down and make a complete fool out of me with my answers.
Great. Mr. Williams, you've traveled all over the world and covered countless stories, and you've received many honors and awards for these stories. In the past couple of years, which trip or story that you covered has had the biggest impact on your life?
I think that is, you know, it gets me to thinking. I've been very, very lucky the way my life has turned out. I've been very lucky to have survived a few things that I've been involved in. At a reception a few minutes ago, I was remembering something I tend to forget, the war with Hezbollah in Israel a few years back, where there were Katyusha rockets passing just underneath the helicopter I was riding in. A few years before that, you go back to Iraq, and I looked down the tube of an RPG that had been fired at us, and it hit the chopper in front of ours. And I'm so fortunate to be sitting here. But I think of all of the stories in the past few years, I think without dispute it was Katrina, because I was there for it. We flew down the night before, and I was inside the Superdome for the hurricane. I rode it out with the people inside the Superdome. Not all the people I was with lived, and they weren't killed by the hurricane. I think it's fair to say they were killed by the botched response to it. So to grow up loving this country, as I still do, having such great faith in this country, to then see us just fall apart. We fell apart in that storm, and there's probably a number of reasons for it. But I was there to bear witness. We beat the first responders to Katrina because we were there early, and it was quite an event in my life.
Last year, you joined Bono to travel to Africa to report on the major issues that the people there are facing. A few weeks ago here, Nicholas Kristof from the New York Times came to speak about the genocide in Darfur. And while there are journalists like Kristof that are addressing the genocide and informing the public about the atrocities there, it seems that most of the American press have not covered the issue in its entirety. Do you think that the media is partly to blame for America's lack of interest in the genocide?
Yeah, I think it's a terrific question, first of all. Nick Kristof has cited a co-worker of mine, Ann Curry, who has taken it upon herself fearlessly. This is a woman with children and a family who goes over to Darfur and has risked her life to report from there. I think it's a very fair question. It's a chicken and an egg proposition, really. Some great reporting is going on, and a tiny audience is seeing it. We realize that we reach about 10 million people a night, and that's about the largest news audience there is left anywhere. So we try to, it's very expensive and it's very costly and it's very dangerous. When I go to Iraq, as I have 4 times, I have to volunteer for it. No one sends me. I raise my hand. When I raised my hand recently and wanted to make my 5th trip in October, I have a coworker named Tom Brokaw who thought that was a bad idea. And he told me so. And so I canceled the trip. I didn't want, once he said, don't go, I don't think it's safe right now, that totally jinxed it for me. And what was I going to do? Look my wife in the eye and say, no, it would be fine. We don't have a problem with going to dangerous places. A lot of us consider that our jobs. But I think this, and I hope we do talk about this very question, this crux between if we air it, will people pay attention? We can't allow ourselves to be driven by public tastes all the time. I've had people say to me, no one's going to watch that. No one cares. And that's a cancerous, deadly, awful thing to say in a newsroom. Because, as you know, when you were being raised by your parents, a balanced meal contains stuff that we don't all like. I think lima beans are hideous, but they evidently contain great things. And into all lives come meals containing lima beans. I learned as a young kid growing up in New Jersey. So, you got to have your lima beans along with a balanced meal. We try to put things in the newscast that you read in the New York Times every day, you read in your local paper, that balance it out. And sometimes they're not pretty, they're not pleasant, but they reflect our world.
Some people feel that journalists and the media dropped the ball when it came to the invasion with Iraq. And because of this, some feel that the media have become more of a lapdog than a watchdog for the government. What do you have to say about this, and how are journalists trying to work to regain this trust in people?
First of all, promise me, if it's your career goal, that you will do what I do for a living, because you're very good at this.
Thank you.
Second, I think everyone in my line of work has to admit that we all collectively dropped the ball. But I'd ask everyone to go back and look at the tapes and pull the newspaper clippings. We had just been hit harder than Pearl Harbor. You had Dan Rather crying on David Letterman. You had Jay Leno unable to contain his emotions. These are the people who entertain us at night. These are the people who were going to give us permission to laugh again. Rudolph Giuliani had to go on Saturday Night Live and say it's okay for New York to laugh again. We were badly hurt. And so the president, in a way, was handed a kind of sentimental blank check. We just said, do whatever go get these bad guys and go find them and do what you've got to do. It's much easier for me to cover Katrina and say, we're up to our keisters in water, and where is FEMA, and where are the supplies? I couldn't do that in Iraq. With weapons inspectors and no unaffiliated reporters allowed over there, I couldn't go to the desert, as I have, and say, we're not finding any of these WMDs. When you're talking about mobile labs, when Colin Powell gives the speech he gave before the UN, that was a disincentive to ask a lot of questions. I think it'll be looked on as one of the great media failures, but I also think it's much easier to say in the rearview mirror than it was then.
For News 64, I'm Emily Fitzmaurice.